Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. Banning non-competes. Lina Khan, chair of the Federal Trade Commission, on the binding deals that keep workers tied to their jobs.
Getting rid of non-competes will be good for workers, it'll be good for the labor market, but it's also going to be good for our economy.
What do we do?
Pro-Palestine demonstrations sweep university campuses, young Americans, and the Israel-Hamas war.
Who doesn't know what happened on October 7th, though, by now?
And when words matter.
We're past the point of naive.
Ivy League Columbia University at the heart of the unrest. Graduate and donor Robert Kraft, owner of the New England Patriots, joins us.
I think that Alexander and John Jay would be flipping in their graves if they saw what's going on at Columbia now.
And he offers a stark warning.
This is 2024 in the United States of America. Am I hearing things right?
It's Thursday, April 25th. Squawk Pod begins right now. First up today on the podcast, a power shift in American workplaces. The Federal Trade Commission has voted to ban non-competes, employee contracts or agreements that prevent you from joining a competitor or starting your own business that might take a little business from your boss. This is the first time in many years that the agency has mandated an economy-wide change. It's due to take effect in August. The FTC estimates that some 30 million Americans at a range of wages are bound by non-competes, and that these agreements stifle innovation rather than encourage it. Squawk Box anchors Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin discussed the changes this rule can bring. Today, they started on the Squawk set with Nasdaq CEO Adena Friedman.
Non-competes. Do you have non-competes among your executives?
We do have non-competes among our executives.
So what is your view of this?
Well, I would have to say I was, surprised. I wasn't surprised because I know it's been discussed for a while. I personally feel like our company has a lot of IP. We provide opportunities for our executives to build that IP inside of Nasdaq. And therefore, we do feel like we should have some period of time where we're protected if they were to go out into the broader world.
Do you have any of those executives who are making less than $150,000, though? Because if that's the limit, usually those types of jobs, you're making more than that.
Yeah, we also, but I would say that we have non-competes not across our entire employee base, but with a certain employee set. My view is that IP protection is something to be considered as you're managing the movements of your team. I also understand that this is the new reality, and so we'll obviously be able to work with it.
I think this targets in a lot of ways people who are making less money, who are being held captive to something. If you think about somebody who walks into a hair salon, and I say this because every hairdresser I've ever known has complained about this, where you walk into a hair salon and you have to sign a non-compete right away.
And I also would say that you have to be reasonable. We're very reasonable in giving our employees the opportunity to go seek employment somewhere else if they want, and our non-competes are quite limited. But obviously, we'll have to reevaluate that going forward.
The chair of the Federal Trade Commission, Lina Khan, spoke to Andrew Ross Sorkin today about this new rule banning non-competes. Here's that conversation.
We're talking about non-competes this morning. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and some other business groups now suing the Federal Trade Commission over its decision to ban non-compete clauses for U.S. workers. The groups say the FTC doesn't have the authority to implement the rule and that the rule itself is too broad. Join us right now to respond to that and help us all understand how the rule is supposed to work. FTC Chair Lina Khan is here. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So let's talk first, though, about how this rule is supposed to work. We talked about it on the air yesterday when it was announced. I actually think there's a bit of a misunderstanding about what's happened. Contracts that are already in place for folks that are being paid over $151,000 and have a policy-making role can stay in place for as long as the contract exists. But new contracts for even people at the very top of these organizations can't be created, correct?
That's right. So once the rule goes into effect, which as of right now will probably be around the end of August, beginning of September, any new contracts will not be able to include non-competes for workers and employees.
So we now have a Chamber of Commerce and a whole number of businesses suing, saying that this rule is effectively illegal, that it's an overreach, effectively, of the government, and that it's going to create all sorts of problems for business. You've heard the comments that have come in from business, not just in the past day, but over the past several months as you've been receiving them. What do you make of that?
So we did get a lot of comments. We got 26,000 public comments. 25,000 of them were in support of a ban. And this was across the country, across sectors, across income levels. Because at the end of the day, what non-competes do is they keep talent locked up. They prevent a more efficient matching between employer and employee. And so getting rid of non-competes will be good for workers. It'll be good for the labor market, but it's also going to be good for our economy. It's going to allow a boost in new business formation, in new startups. And it's going to mean that if somebody has a good idea, they're able to bring that idea to market rather than being locked up.
I think a lot of people agree with you, especially in the context of if you were a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant with a non-compete. That makes no sense. A hairdresser, all sorts of people in that kind of space. I think it gets more complicated the more senior you get in an organization. And if, in fact, the rule is not just to keep the current contracts of those senior people in place, but new contracts would not allow for non-competes, how you're supposed to think about how a business is supposed to make an investment around one particular individual if, in fact, they can turn around tomorrow and go to the competitor across the street.
So we absolutely heard some concerns from businesses, especially as it relates to trade secrets or a concern that somebody would be able to leave and take the customer list. And those are legitimate concerns, and that's why we have things like trade secrets law, non-disclosure agreements, non-solicitation provisions. So all of those would be able to stay in place. When it comes to, investing in workers and investing in people, that's something that will happen anyway. And if the goal of the business is to keep those people, then they can do that by creating all sorts of incentives, right? You can pay them more, you can provide better benefits, you can enhance the working conditions. And so we believe that there are other levers that businesses can use to actually attract and retain
I'll use
people.
an example just because we're on TV. So most people who are on TV have contracts that prevent them. So here we are at CNBC, NBC Universal's the parent company. ABC's just down the street. Literally, Good Morning America's right there. CBS is just across the street as well. I could not call up my boss today and say, you know what, thank you so much, this has been wonderful. I'm going to work over there tomorrow morning. Do you think I should be able to?
If you have a current contract that reflects the fact that this non-compete is in the contract, your compensation package probably also reflects that. We don't want to disturb that because we realize that for people who are, doing very well for themselves, who are well situated to bargain, the contract and the compensation already reflects the value of the non-compete. But going forward, we believe that those should not be in place, and companies will be able to use other mechanisms to retain people if they want.
Let me ask you about what might be described as workarounds, which is to say you look at the state of California where this is already in operation to some degree, and people can develop LLCs, partnerships, and the like. Partnerships in the state of California, if you become a partner, there's a view that non-disclosure, or not non-disclosure, but non-competes are different. Do you think that there are other places that, and by the way, the financial industry, private equity, banks and the like are typically not regulated by the FTC. Are they regulated by this rule or not?
That's right. So the rule is limited by the FTC's authority and the contours of that authority. So in sectors where we don't have authority, be it banks, be it certain types of common carriers, employees in those sectors will not be covered, but other government agencies do have the ability to reach that. I'm so glad you mentioned California, because sometimes one argument that gets made is that non-competes are essential for innovation. But as you noted, non-competes have been non-enforceable in California since the 1800s, and I think people would be hard-pressed to say that California hasn't been able to innovate. And so we think that eliminating non-competes will actually boost innovation, boost new business creation, and be better for the American economy.
What do you say to the argument about just cost? The cost to a business to enforce non-disclosure agreements, for example, to enforce controlling your own IP could go up. I imagine you will see a lot more lawsuits in the future against employees, against rival competitors, because employees will go from one place to another, which they did in the past, and they will have to go to court to try to enforce something that you could argue they were trying to enforce through the non-compete.
if a business believes that an employee is violating the trade secrets law, they absolutely can bring a lawsuit there. The way that our system of law and system of justice works is that you can only bring a lawsuit and only penalize somebody once they violate the law. The idea that instead we should have non-competes that preemptively lock people in place just because they might hypothetically in the future one day, violate trade secrets, it doesn't really make sense. Non-competes is way, way, way overbroad for that purpose.
I wonder if this comes into your calculus at all, the word inflation. If you look at this, if it works and is successful as you'd want it to be, you could also argue, as great as it's going to be for wages, it could also turn out to be inflationary.
We absolutely predict that workers' wages are going to go up, but we also predict that this is going to create new businesses, new startups, because a lot of the comments that we heard was not just from workers sharing how non-competes had kept them in abusive jobs or prevented them from getting better opportunity. It was actually from people who saw that their current employer wasn't meeting a particular need in the marketplace. And they thought, I should be able to go start my own business, go meet that market need. We heard from startups about how non-competes are preventing the most talented scientists from being able to work on the most innovative discoveries. And so we think there's a lot of innovation that's being locked up right now that eliminating non-competes will unleash, and that'll be good for the economy overall.
Let me ask you a different question. We're in an election year, 2024. And there is a question about whether your boss will be your boss at the end of this year or not, and therefore whether you might even have this role or not. How do you think about that in the context of the work you're doing now, and whether that work would continue under, if for example, former President Trump becomes the president again?
One thing that's been so striking to me about the FTC's work and anti-monopoly more generally is the degree of bipartisan agreement that monopoly power is hurting American people in their day-to-day lives. And I think we've seen a huge groundswell of public support for the FTC's work. And so whoever ends up having the honor of being in these roles in the future, I think will continue to have to stay accountable to the public and to public officials.
But do you say to yourself, it's very possible that a lot of the work that you've done unravels, that some of the cases that you're either bringing now or planning to bring, become moot?
Look, I absolutely hope we're going to have more time. But if we don't, we are undertaking our work with an eye to some of the institutional durability to hope that it can stay in place. Historically, there's been a long tradition of lawsuits that were filed continuing and going forward, even once administrations change. And so I expect that would continue.
Lina Khan, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much.
Hope to see you again very, very soon.
Cheese will be next.
Next on Squawk Pod, the rolling tide of protest on college campuses. The Speaker of the House made a special trip to Columbia University.
Enjoy your free speech.
And we'll hear from a Columbia Business School grad and donor, New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft, on the fears of anti-Semitism.
I don't want the 1940s to replicate here, and unfortunately, I'm seeing signs of that.
Back after this.
We have several members of Congress here, and we're here today at one of America's preeminent academic institutions on a very important day and a very important time.
House Speaker Mike Johnson is calling on Columbia's president to resign if she can't immediately bring order to the chaos on campus. He is threatening to pull federal funding for schools that don't create safe environments for Jewish students. And he hinted that the National Guard could be sent in if threats and intimidation aren't stopped.
We met briefly with the president and the top officials right before we came out on the steps here. We encouraged her to take immediate action and stamp this out. And our feeling is that they have not acted to restore order on the campus. This is dangerous. This is not free expression. This is not First Amendment. They are threatening, intimidating.
The Speaker's appearance was met by boos and heckling from the crowd. At one point, he paused his prepared remarks and responded, "Enjoy your free speech." In the meantime, a pro-Palestinian encampment was set up at Harvard University yesterday. They demonstrated against Israel's war against Hamas and Harvard's suspension of a student group. Pro-Palestinian protests also erupted on the campus of the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. They are calling for the school to divest from any company doing business with Israel. Police got involved in protests with some campuses, arresting at least 73 people at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles and 34 people at the University of Texas in Austin. Definitely seems like these issues are stepping up. We're getting close to the end of the school year. Maybe that's what ends some of these things.
Shame for people that wanted to graduate at Columbia and things like that. I guess we don't need to run a soundbite of Jason from yesterday, but I guess these tents are set up next to the kickball game that Jason talked about.
This happened yesterday right after we talked to Jason.
Oh, it's right after,
when he was talking about it.
Yesterday, there was like huge gatherings of students playing spike ball and frisbee when I was walking through the yard.
They must have stopped playing kickball. What did he say they were playing? Did he say kickball or cornhole or something? Yeah, they're just a bunch. All those wackos, all our kids are just out there.
Well, they shut down the yard after that because they said you have to have a student ID to get in. We didn't
get much of an answer from him on it, other than, it's not happening at Harvard when it is happening at Harvard.
Well, we have talked about how students protest in general. It's a pretty common thing. What's different about this? I will tell you what's different about this. I read a letter that was posted online from some of the Jewish students at Columbia. Here's what they've been hearing in terms of those protests. Hamas make us proud, take another soldier out. There is only one solution, intifada revolution. We say justice, you say how? Burn Tel Aviv to the ground. Yo, Hamas, we love you. We support your rockets too. Yo, Hamas, give them hell. Those are the types of chants that are being, that's different than peaceful protest.
But can I just say, we're a business network, and there's a lot of business leaders who watch this broadcast, and we'll have Robert Kraft come on, and he's taken some action.
5 years ago, he started.
And we'll see what kind of influence that has on Columbia. But the truth is, and I've been on the phone with them all week, most executives in America at businesses want to do nothing. They want to say nothing. Everybody remains silent. And this is where you hire your employees from. This is the culture of the next generation of all these businesses.
The protests.
And yes, and everybody talks about their responsibility to society and the responsibility to actually do something about these things. There is, by the way, all of the people who are watching this broadcast right this second could actually do something. They hire from Columbia. They hire from all these universities. Right. I know, the last time we got into a debate about whether you should hire from these places, Bill Ackman said he wasn't going to hire some of these kids, and then Larry Summers said, well, actually, that was a mistake, that these kids are naive. We're past the point of naive. We are past the point of naive. For anyone who's involved in these protests is past the point of naive. This has been going on for a very long time, and we're no longer talking about what happened, the protests that were being made on October 8th or October 9th, and the level of vitriol and the level of anti-Semitism is at a completely different place. And why these business leaders do not speak out and call up the administration and say, look, we're not hiring any of your students. And you know what? The innocent students will be injured by this, but it will actually galvanize by the way, all the other students at Columbia and these other universities who also say nothing, who also sit in the corner and say, I'm not doing it. You actually want to galvanize pressure on these schools to not have this kind of behavior in any other environment, whether we're talking about gays, blacks, you name the minority group, people would be screaming from the rooftops about the way this is going on.
And CEOs were only too happy to weigh in on all those progressive, media-safe issues. And Bill Ackman, when we had him on, I said, Bill, you've been enabling this. I'm not going to say the S word, but you've been enabling this for 5. And he copped to it. He goes, you're right. I've watched a lot of stuff go through, and now it comes home to roost, Andrew. And if you are going to instill a lot of these progressive notions, it's not just this. It goes across the board, and we've seen a slow seep into academia where it's just almost an echo chamber. How can it be every college where it's like this? It's a sick, sad situation. First thing you got to do, get the masks off, because you're not going to be able to not hire people if you don't know who was in the demonstrations in the first place, right? But I can even understand why Biden doesn't say anything really solid, because he's got to win Michigan. He's got all the. Where's the CEO up for re-election? Is he worried about customers or?
I hear it all the time.
Well, why didn't they? When Michael Jordan said Republicans buy sneakers too, Nike didn't care what they did to the right. Disney, all these woke companies, none of them cared what they did to the right. And now they're worried about, now it comes home to roost.
It's not about the right. It's not about
it was
right.
back then.
No, but you know what
it was
about?
back
It's
then.
about,
it was about guns.
It's about a genuine sense of anti-Semitism that's actually throughout this whole country. That's what this is.
I agree. I understand.
The reason why
but it's come
most
back
CEOs will tell you
why
that they do not want to screen.
Yeah.
Because they genuinely think that their customers are going to come for them and they're going to boycott their companies. They genuinely
the same kids that are
not just the kids, broader. They think their employees are going to make a problem for them. All of these folks who I think have some moral center but don't know what to do with it are sitting there saying, I want to say something, but I can't. And that, to me, is a very sad state of affairs about where we are in America today. That the leaders of the business world, which are going to pay all of these people money eventually, are not willing to say, enough, we're not doing it this way.
But it's a powder keg right now, and you remember,
Andrew, I think you're right.
You don't remember the 60s, but it's bad now. They're not finished. Netanyahu is not finished. They're thinking right now what to do in the remaining bastion where Hamas still is. They're still going to do that. What's going to happen then? What type of environment are we going to be living in at that point? And how do you, once the fuse gets lit, how does it go to USC and University of Texas and Austin, high schools now as well? And I just, I'm still confused as to where it came from. I guess we've been lulled into a false sense of security of who these colleges are hiring. Under the radar.
But
they've all been hiring these same wackos.
I don't even think it's just at the but the point I'm making is I don't think it's even just at the universities. And I think that's the real problem.
You can't blame the kids. Kids. I don't know. Like they say, they're very idealistic and passionate.
I don't know if you've seen some of these.
But they are getting.
They don't even know what they're protesting.
They are getting this stuff day in and day out from a lot of their professors.
And there's a need for absolute education. People need to understand what's happening here and what's.
I think some of them don't know what happened. Who doesn't know what happened on October 7th though by now? And how can you?
I don't know.
And the point being made that if you said this about African Americans, you would never work anywhere again in academia again. If you said, I want to lynch someone, or you can't, and they're saying that. They're saying that.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't understand why. There's nothing more to say.
What about Mike John? What about no federal funds for colleges that allow this to go on?
A lot of these are private institutions that don't.
Yeah, but they still get money. It's
an interesting one. I don't know. That one actually is even harder for me because I'm more of a private sector guy. I know you think I'm not, but it's more of I think.
Yeah, but public money moves debates.
And the public money can move the debate too.
You're an enigma wrapped in a riddle, surrounded by a conundrum.
I'll take it.
New England's Patriots owner and Columbia University alumnus Robert Kraft says he's not comfortable supporting the school until it takes action to stem growing hatred on campus and until it can protect its students and staff. Kraft says the school that provided him with so much opportunity is no longer recognizable to him. Protests against the Israel-Hamas war and calls for the university to divest from companies connected to Israel have spawned threats and harassment against Jewish students. And Bob Kraft joins us now. He's also the founder of the Foundation to Combat Antisemitism. You wrote an op-ed today that I'll just like. Welcome, Bob. It's good to see you as always. This is the cover. The cover of the New York Post. Not everybody who's on the cover, if you get on the cover of the New York Post, it's kind of questionable whether. But in this case, it's a positive thing for you, Bob. But you wrote an op-ed. What are the key points of what you put forth in that op-ed?
Well, I'm thinking of Columbia where I went, and they have a core curriculum that really helped train me as a young kid coming from New England. I wasn't ready for the world from Boston. And I think that Alexander and John Jay would be flipping in their graves if they saw what's going on at Columbia now, which was such an open forum. When I went there, it was during the Vietnam War, and free speech prevailed, and people expressed their opinion, and they didn't cover their faces, and there was accountability. And there wasn't the anger and hate that exists now on campuses. And it's very sad to me to see the faculty taking strong positions and doing that and sort of trying to teach young people what to think rather than how to think, and have the openness. And, you know, you think about the greatness of this country is that people came from all backgrounds, and you came here and you felt, your ancestors felt comfortable and they felt they belonged and they had a chance. And now it's shocking to me that young Jewish students at Columbia in New York City are scared. They're going home. There's a young student from the Boston area who came back 2 weeks ago and told their dad that they wanted to transfer out of Columbia because they didn't feel safe on the campus. And I'm going, this is 2024 in the United States of America. Am I hearing things right?
Bob, it's hard to understand how we got here. You did a pretty good summary, and I think it's taken time, and I think it's almost an echo chamber at a lot of these places. So I don't know how we got here, but I don't know how we get out of this. And you saw what happened yesterday. Once again, maybe it starts slowly, and by the end of the day, we were talking about USC and University of Texas at Austin, and I don't know whether a heavy-handed approach is something that makes sense at this point. Obviously, everybody is entitled to free speech, but you are not entitled to threaten people and harm people. So there's a line that could be drawn. Do you think a heavy-handed approach, and where are you right now, Bob?
I'm in Boston.
Oh, that's a
we
Boston
have a little
shot?
thing known as the draft tonight. And
okay. I brought it up because I think Governor DeSantis at this point is talking about if you close down a bridge or a road, you're going to jail. If you do X, you're going to jail. If you do this, you're going. Is that the approach to take? Because it didn't work back in the years and years ago when college kids are on a mission like this. I'm just wondering what the right approach is at this point, so that. You want to protect Jewish students, but I don't know if you want to have a situation where you see, riot police.
Well, we want to protect all students and all people. That's the foundation of this country. And I do want to say a word that I think Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul and the New York Police Department did a great job when they were called in. But this is about enforcing the rules that we have on campus and holding people accountable. I don't think people should have free speech and be covering their faces. I don't think any group should be allowed to just come and camp on college campus without getting the permits or following the rules. We've let people not follow the rules, and then we're compromising with them instead of getting them getting the place in order. And I must tell you, one of the things I sort of look up to and admire now is the way the Jesuit schools run. They allow free speech, but they have rules and they follow them. I see that right here in Boston with Boston College, and they all do a great job.
Hey, Bob. I give you great credit for speaking out on an issue that seems so blatantly obvious, I think, to many. And yet, as you know, so many other leaders, business leaders and the like, have been unwilling to speak out. And I'm curious why you think that is, because when it comes to bringing some form of pressure to bear, frankly, on the administrations of these universities that seem to allow so much of this anti-Semitic hate, and I'm with you. I think it's important that we also differentiate between what is anti-Semitic hate and free speech and the possibility of folks protesting policies and the like, but doing that in a way that does not fundamentally harass and put other people in danger. But when I speak to business leaders, many of them friends of yours, they don't want to speak out.
They're really afraid, Andrew, and it bothers me. I don't know if this is a function of the impact of social media and the lies that go out so fast. And, people don't want to be targets. Look, no one, it's just in life, you learn when you're leading an organization or doing things, there's a certain culture you try to create. And then when that culture isn't being adhered to, the true leaders have to speak up and be counted on. And if I told you the amount of people who have reached out to me and said, thank you for speaking out, letters, texts, it's just, and I hope those people find a way who they feel the same way I feel. We're playing with the strong tenets of the foundation of this country. And, it starts like it did in the 30s in Germany. And it's why I started this Blue Square Foundation 5 years ago. I saw signs of hate developing here. And I don't want the 1940s to replicate here. And unfortunately, I'm seeing signs of that. And good people have to stand up and be counted. And that's what leadership is. And we're just looking, so many people from so many different backgrounds have come here, but whether it's Asians, Hispanics, Hindu, Buddhists, gay people, they're next. It's all coming if we don't say something.
Bob, I just wonder, how do you see this reconciling, Bob? And I don't know what the path looks like, and nobody knows the future. But as I was alluding to it earlier, it almost looks like a fuse has been lit on campuses. You've raised money to try to help this cause. Is it about deploying funds to help the cause, or maybe withholding funds from colleges that don't get this under control, whether it's federal or big benefactors, or what's going to be the answer? And I don't know how you win, whether you win the hearts and minds of people. I don't know how you do it through brute force. It's a real problem, right? And it's a conundrum, but we got to get it right.
Well, first of all, I think there's some organization outside this country that is impacting our college campuses, and that for people who have greater knowledge than I, hopefully are looking into it. But I think it's the responsibility of the executive leadership and the trustees of the different schools who are responsible to make sure that rules are being followed. And that means the students, but also faculty. And I just wonder whether we shouldn't be looking at the whole area of what responsibility comes with tenure, and when violations of policies are made, whether tenured faculty should really remain employed. Why are people covering their faces?
Yep.
There should be a rule. You burn the flag in the United States of America, you go to jail. If you're going to go and be a rabble rouser and have your face covered, you should be arrested, or come there and have free speech, say what you want, but do it where there's accountability. And it's really sad to me that the greatest country on earth has this going on. And we have to collectively, those people who love America and love the foundation that was founded on, have to band together to make sure that we're not breaking our core values.
Right. Bob, agree to all those things, and I agree with, the mask gotta, that might be a simple way to do it, but that'll be met with a lot of pushback as well. You shouldn't have masks on, and then maybe you won't ever get a job, ever, hopefully, if you're doing things where, you should be disqualified from that. Bob, thank you, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks for all your efforts.
I feel you three of you do a great job in education, and you represent America. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you, and thanks for coming on, Bob. We'll see you.
Still to come on Squawk Pod.
Write this down.
Airlines giving you cash refunds automatically for cancellations, seriously delayed baggage, and other travel headaches. A new rule from the Department of Transportation. Will it stick?
What about truly Deus Ex Machina, whatever the hell it is? Deus Ex Machina.
What?
Acts of God.
You're listening to Squawk Pod. Here's Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Up and Andrew, Q.
I want to talk about the Biden administration planning now to require airlines to automatically provide cash refunds when flights are canceled. It's also going to require the disclosure of fees such as bag check fees earlier in the booking process. The new rules finalized yesterday. It requires cash refunds if a domestic arrival or departure is changed by, write this down, more than 3 hours or 6 hours for international passengers were already entitled to refunds for such changes, but airlines often made passengers haggle with customer service agents to get the cash. Instead of the vouchers, you used to have to call and you'd wait on hold. The rules take effect in 6 months. The question is going to be the enforcement of this. The whole idea is that you're going to have a problem, and all of a sudden, magically, within 7 days, you should look at your credit card bill, and all of a sudden, the money should be refunded to you.
If your flight gets canceled or if it just gets delayed?
The question is whether, well, if it's canceled, they're supposed to send you the money, and then there's a delay fee as well that would just be sent to you. The enforcement
Even if you
issue,
still took the flight. Even if you waited.
Yes,
yeah, it's like
the delay.
But it wouldn't be a full refund.
No,
It
you
wouldn't be
get
a
$200
full
or
refund.
$300.
The question about all this is, it's supposed to work so you don't have to call the airline.
Right.
They're supposed to just do it. The real question is how this is going to be genuinely enforced, and whether you're going to see the Department of Transportation, which put this in place, fine the airlines, and what other kinds of real steps they can take to make sure that the airlines do this. By the way, there's going to be some cost. I would actually be very curious to talk to Phil LeBeau and others
What that does to airline
about
tickets prices.
what it may do to airline ticket prices, but also even in the next 6 months, what kind of CapEx is going to have to be spent by airlines to coordinate all of this. Meaning you have to build systems so that all of this, so that the money can get back to you.
We might be able to drive them into another bailout.
But no. So I would also say if this works, it should also change behavior, not by customers, but by the airlines. Meaning all of the oversold routes where they know that they are making it so difficult to begin with, they may have to say to themselves, you know what, that route, we can't throw an extra flight on that route because the chances that we're going to have to spend extra money.
It's the equivalent of just on-time manufacturing, where things don't show up
But what
until
about
then. We saw big problems with that during the
Deus
crisis.
Ex Machina, whatever the hell it is. Deus Ex Machina. Acts of God.
And that is Squawk Pod for today. Thank you for being here. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern to get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears. Follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.